Well, good morning and welcome to ELEVENSES. I trust you can hear me. I'm having some problems with the microphone again this morning. I think I probably need to invest in a new one. Unfortunately, it's more expense. At the time, I've spent quite a lot of money already, but hey ho, that's life. So, anyway, welcome to ELEVENSES. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. This is show number 420. It's Sunday, the 14th of April, and it's a fairly bright morning at the moment out there. What have I got for you in today's show? Well, the Danish government wants to disband a patch club. The Irish Gardaí have seized a huge haul of motorbikes, drugs and cash in Dublin. Northants, they blame the rain for causing the potholes and for not being able to fix them. Oh, Sue said she can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Sue. MAG want waiting time on yellow lines, but only for motorcycles. Loan companies are being investigated over disappearing motorcycles in Kenya. More people than ever are searching for electric motorcycles on Google in the UK, and there is a limited edition Jonathon Rea replica R1, just in case you're interested. And finally, we'll have a look at crash detection systems on cars and why they are still apparently struggling to spot motorcycles. So settle yourselves down for the next 35 minutes or so as we go through all those news stories. Good morning to Kevin, who's also looked in. Now, I'll just start with the story that basically it all comes back to the Ryan Fortnine story. This was all about, you may recall, impact protectors, and what Ryan was saying about those was that he was going to leave them out of his jackets and trousers for the foreseeable future. And basically he was promoting airbags, which is something that he has talked about on other occasions. Anyway, I thought this was quite an interesting story, so I covered it in depth, as you'll probably recall, last week on ELEVENSES. And then on Monday, I followed it up with a post based on what I'd said on ELEVENSES on Facebook. A week on, full week after I posted it, basically, 7 days later, it's still getting comments. According to the stats this morning, this particular story's reached over 64,000 accounts. Doesn't mean 64,000 people have actually read it, but at least it's been delivered to 64,000 people. But it has been liked 152 times, which is good news. It's been shared 20 times too, which also helps it get seen. It's also been commented on no less than 193 times, so it has attracted a great deal of attention. I've done my best to respond to the vast majority of the comments. Now, I don't mind putting in this effort because, after all, people have gone to the trouble themselves of writing something in response to my posts. I think it's only polite that I put a bit of time into answering them. My experience on other channels really is that other content creators rarely bother to respond to people who have actually answered or responded to them, which I think is a bit of a disappointment really. But anyway, so I hope that my efforts are appreciated as building a bit of community spirit. However, having said that, I do wish people would actually read what I wrote and not respond to what they think I said. Some people implied the article was too long. It was about 1,500 words. It's about 5 minutes reading for the average person, so at 300 words per minute, that's not that long. But the point I wanted to make in my response to the Fortnite video was actually this, and I'll quote exactly what I wrote. The difficulty for the layman, represented in this case by non-experts like Ryan and myself, lies in our ability to be able to take, then use the data provided to have an answer to the question, just how effective is body armor? That was the point I was trying to make. Now, I said at the time, it's this idea of mitigating the force of the impact that matters. And while I don't really think Ryan was right to toss his armour away, what I did say is I didn't think he was entirely wrong either. And I went on to explain, the problem is not the impact test, nor the product test data. As I said in my recent Focus on Friday series, tests are designed around specified parameters, and the data the tests accumulate is what it is. The problem that really arises is the average rider needs to know the answer to a different question. What does that test result on a piece of protective kit mean for me when I crash? Now, I actually wrote that around the third of the way through the article, so maybe 1.5 to 2 minutes reading for most people, but clearly some people had problems getting that far but were quite happy to respond. So one person wrote, "I didn't have time to read the entire manifesto." Manifesto? 1,500 words? Blimey, best not tackle War and Peace. However, he said, I did watch Ryan's full video, so he did manage to find the 6 minutes it takes to actually watch that. And then he went on to say, "You stated that Ryan was calling for us to stop using body armour. That is blatantly incorrect." Well, actually, it's that response to my article that was incorrect. Nowhere did I say stop using body armour. Nowhere did I say that Ryan said stop using body armour. Anyway, I responded politely to this chap to say that actually he wasn't correct, explained what I actually had said, and subsequently it seems he must have actually read to the end of the article, because he then came back to me, admitted that he was wrong, that I had never said that Ryan was telling people to stop using armour, and duly apologised, which, so fair enough, everyone's happy. But how much easier if he'd actually read all the way through the article before he chipped in. But I'm afraid that what's obvious from many of the responses is that I completely failed to get my main point over, which was to repeat this. It's the standards tests and the test results, they allow us to identify the best and worst kit, but what's equally obvious is that nothing in those test results all the standards tell us what it means for the real world. And that's my point, that there's an information gap for end users. As I said to somebody on the forum, it's all very well to know that a sausage, for example, is made of 80% meat, but what's that meat consist of? How much of it is fat, how much of it is protein? Because if you're on a diet, that's what matters. It's all technically meat. So there are one or two responses that really leaves me wondering, though, why anybody attempts to provide anybody on a bike with serious data. There was one person who came over all Matt Hancock about being happy to dismiss a published scientific research paper, quote, on personal experience and common sense. I did think of referring to my recent series on the scientific method and the problems of following the science with your own personal opinions, but then again, someone a lot cleverer than me said in the 18th century, common sense is not so common. In case you're wondering, by the way, that was Voltaire. Anyway, on with the rest of the show, and we'll start with the weather. Hopefully we'll get the right graphic up. There it is. Good stuff. Now, this afternoon it'll be rather cooler, noticeably cooler if you're out there on the bike, but it'll still be mostly dry. Sunny spells across the south of the UK, but it will turn breezy. As you go further north, then you're more likely to encounter cloud and scattered showers, and they could merge into longer spells of rain at time. Now, Monday the temperature drops even further, actually slightly below average for this time of year. Showery rain will be clearing the southeast during the morning, and behind it will come a mix of sunny spells and scattered blustery and sometimes heavy showers, which could be wintry on northern and western hills. There'll be a northern airflow right across the country by Wednesday, and that will bring a mix of sunshine and showers, but it will be again wintry the further north you go. And then thicker cloud will build in across the north, patchy rain in the north and west. So a mixed bag, not too awful, but not particularly warm. Kevin says, read the feedback given to you. Some have the attention span of a goldfish. Well, actually, I read an interesting item on that just the other day, to the effect that human beings now have an attention span which is less than a goldfish. The average mobile phone user looks at a piece of information on their phone for somewhat less than 6 seconds, shorter than a goldfish can concentrate. So there you go. Anyway. On with the news now. On Wednesday, the Danish government they announced that they want a court of law to dissolve the Danish arm of the Bandidos motorcycle club. The Danish chapter of the Bandidos was created in 1993, and within 3 years a feud with the rival Hells Angels had erupted. The violence between the two groups has spread across Denmark, Norway, Sweden and Finland, and it's left 11 dead and nearly 100 wounded. Now, under Danish law, organisations that promote or incite violence can be dissolved by court order, and members of the Bandidos have been jailed for murder, attempted murder, assault and drug-related crimes in the country. In June, the government said a specialised police unit was looking into disbanding the group, and the Justice Minister, Peter Hummelgaard, he said the freedom of association was not created to protect criminals. I would like to have them all banned if it is legally possible. Well, I'm sure it's legally possible to ban a group, but how you prevent them going underground is anybody else's guess. Meanwhile, over in Ireland, the Gardaí conducted a massive day of action on Thursday, seizing a large number of motorcycles, drugs and also cash in Dublin. Now, their specific target was electric motorcycles, which they suspected of being used for criminal activities. No less than 120 officers in 19 teams from the Divisional Serious Crime Unit. They got support from the Community Engagement Unit, the Community Policing Unit and the Divisional Roads Policing Unit. Searched 40 properties, seizing 10 Suron electric motorcycles and 12 electric e-bikes and electric e-scooters. Now, backup to this operation was provided by the Armed Support Unit, the National Dog Unit, the Dublin Crime Response Team and Special Tactics and the Operational Command Team. So a huge investment of time and effort there. They also seized 12 motorcycles, presumably conventional motorcycles, off-road bikes, 3 quad bikes and a jet ski and a trailer, along with nearly 43,000 euros in cash, 8,000 euros worth of suspected drugs and 5 designer watches and other designer goods that were valued at 25,000 euros. But it's quite the scale of the operation. Only 2 people were actually arrested. Now, since the operation began 5 months ago, 53 electric motorcycles with a combined value of approximately 300,000 euros have been seized, as has over 80,000 in cash. So presumably this is making a bit of a dent in the criminal operation. Now, I'm always sympathetic to the plight of underfunded councils and their struggle to keep on top of road maintenance, but I was slightly baffled by the chief executive of the West Northants Council, Anna Earnshaw, who said that the wet weather of the last few months has created a double whammy impact on their ability to make pothole repairs. Now, Northamptonshire, along with much of the country I suspect, experienced its second wettest February since 1892, when records first began, and the previous 3, 6 and 12-month periods before that were also record highs for total rainfall in the region. She says that the amount of rain saturates the land, which means that all the rain ends up on the roads, and that is opening up new potholes and breaking up old potholes as well. And she explained that if we go out when it's wet and we fill them, they'll break again very quickly. Then you get this complaint around the quality of the work. And the council go on to say they need to wait for drier weather to tackle some of the worst areas. They also go on to estimate it would take up to 250 million to completely resurf all the county's roads and bring them up to pristine condition. And they say that annual funding across all road and transport services in West Northants is just 1/10 of that amount, and of course only a proportion of that can go towards roads maintenance and pothole repairs. Well, in response to that, I would say that if they repaired the potholes properly in the first place, they may not break up again quite so quickly. You know, when they used to repair a pothole, they used to cut a chunk of the sound tarmac out from around it, dig it all out, backfill it properly, and then resurface the hole and then properly seal it around the edge. Now, basically all they do is they bung a patch, you know, a sort of a mound of tarmac material into the hole and roll it flat. And of course, that doesn't consolidate the subsurface. It doesn't seal the edges of the pothole properly, and it's no big surprise when the pothole breaks up again within months. So I'd say, yeah, she has a point, but if they did the job properly, everything would last rather longer. Right, now don't forget, if you have anything to say, I'm always happy to respond. Got a question, got a comment, drop me a line. I will always try to get back to you during the show if I can, or after the show if I can't. Now, on a slightly different note, one of my favourite songs of the late 1970s was Brass in Pocket by the Pretenders, which I thought was not just a great tune and a great vocal performance by Chrissie Hynde, but I also liked the lyrics, which you may recall included the line, "I'm special, so special," which brings me in a roundabout way to something else I believe is firmly in the "we're special, so special" category. And this is what's been described as a demand from the Motorcycle Action Group, MAG, that motorcyclists be allowed waiting time when parking on street, quote, regardless of urban parking restrictions. Now, MAG chairman Neil Liversidge, he said, quote, there is a strong case to allow a short waiting time for bikers where parking is otherwise restricted. Without delivery riders, there would be tens of thousands of extra journeys in the urban environment due to people fetching their own parcels and takeaway food. It's a hard life being a courier, and they deserve a fairer deal, instead of being targeted for easy money with expensive parking tickets. So, what do MAG want? Well, basically they want bikes, any bikes presumably, to be allowed up to 15 minutes of waiting time on all non-motorway roads where on-street parking isn't, quote, specifically prohibited by notice when parked parallel to the curb so as not to obstruct traffic, regardless of any parking restrictions in the location the vehicle is parked. So I'm slightly confused as to when it could be isn't specifically prohibited by notice, but at the same time have a parking restriction. But anyway, whatever. MAG say it's a bold but completely practical move. It's more like brass neck, if you ask me, which is where I get the connection to brass in pocket, I guess. I think it's just another example of motorcyclists, or at least a particular group of motorcyclists, feeling they're entitled to special treatment, even though I suspect that I hardly one of those thousands of pizza delivery riders and is actually a member of MAG. It makes me wonder, is it election time or something? Personally, I think the organisation would be far better off looking at CBT training standards and fighting for fairer deals for food delivery riders, and that way they might not have to ride like maniacs when they are actually parcel on board, and they might not feature so heavily in crash stats. Or is that too controversial a suggestion? You tell me. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say on that one. Right, now I visited this story before, but it seems this time it's actually under active investigation, and this is the old story about boda operators in Kenya. Now, I did cover this some weeks ago, but I'm coming back to it because it appears that things are now under active government investigation. What happens is the motorcycles being sold under credit to boda operators are actually disappearing, and now Watu Credit, Mogo, Tegundi, 15 Seconds, Mwanchi Credit and My Boda are all under scrutiny, and members of the Boda Association have been sharing their stories with the National Assembly Committee on Finance and National Planning. So it's gone beyond the stage of being reported in their parliament. It's gone to a committee. Now, it's alleged that what happens is that these companies offer low down payments and easy instalments for the purchase of the bikes, which of course drives customers towards them to get the cash to buy the bikes in the first place. But the Riders Association have told MPs that there are a series of dubious sounding practices. For one thing, it seems they only ever hand over a single key, which means that they retain access to the bike. It seems they never deliver the logbook for the bike even after the loan is cleared, which again brings into question just who owns it, and they don't pay the insurance company. Now, in the deposit, that's supposed to pay off the insurance company for the period of the loan. It also covers the installation of a tracker, but once again, when the loan's paid off, riders are not being given access to the trackers fitted to their own motorcycles. But there's worse. As well as there being hidden fees, exorbitant interest rates, and aggressive debt collection tactics, riders are reporting that their bikes inexplicably disappear when they have paid around 90% of the total cost. And despite the companies having the tracker access to the data of the location of the bike, they offer no assistance in recovering them. And then the riders are being forced to pay the remainder of the loan, and they still have no bike. Now, the Boda Association chairman, one Alex Kutima, he told the committee that if the motorbikes are stolen soon after the loan is taken out, the companies are often able to trace them and recover the bikes to the owner. Of course, then the owner can carry on paying the loan. He also claims that riders are told when they take out the loan that their bikes can be traced and reclaimed, and that the company will do so if the rider misses a payment. So it appears that what happens then, bikes are frequently seized, sometimes apparently within a day of missing the payment, and they then get lumped with hefty recovery and storage charges. So if riders cannot pay to recover their bike, which if they're working on the bike to earn money and they've already missed a payment, it does seem that it's going to be tough to do that, then the bike is permanently repossessed and the rider loses both the machine and the entire balance they've actually paid already. And the question is being asked, why is it that the trackers stop working when the motorcycles get lost after almost completion of the loan payment? This cannot be a coincidence, and the association suspects that these companies may collude with thieves to steal the motorcycles just as the loan payment nears completion. Clearly, the government, as they've put this to the committee, are taking this fairly seriously. Right, back in February, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary, they shared pictures of scooters and motorcycles being used to commit crimes, and they showed them being destroyed in the hope of deterring criminals as well as antisocial riding behaviour. I have a feeling I covered that story at the time. On their first day, they invited the press to attend to ensure that the destruction was well documented, and they destroyed 20 e-scooters as well as 2 motorcycles. However, not everyone is behind this move, as this letter in the Isle of Wight Chronicle shows. Whoever thought up the police's Operation Crush policy to destroy e-scooters and off-road motorbikes when used in crimes has not thought through the environmental considerations. These motorcycles will probably have been made in China, by far the world's biggest polluter, whose unregulated industries cause huge damage to the environment. Why then add to that by the carbon cost of crushing vehicles that still work? It's actually a point that I recall was being made in New York in response to the NYPD's seizure and destruction of motorcycles and scooters. If you were on for that show, you'll recall that I showed a huge parking lot absolutely covered with seized motorcycles and scooters. And the writer offers a sensible suggestion as to what could be done with the bikes. He says far better give them to charities, technical colleges, or recipients in poorer countries who can make legitimate use of them, perhaps those boda operators in Kenya. Okay, so don't forget, if you are enjoying the show, don't forget to set a date, Wednesdays and Sundays, and if you want to catch up with old shows, go to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK on the end, and you'll find them all in their own playlist over there, right back to the very first show during lockdown. Right, okay, do you use Google? I use Google a reasonable amount, and one of the things, according to Lexham Insurance, who've been looking at what Google Trends has to say, one of the sort of data crunching things that Google offers you, the search for the topic electric motorbikes and mopeds has shot up 1,000% in the last 5 years. Now, if you go back 5 years, obviously that encompasses the COVID period. Google Trends data also shows that UK searches for electric motorbike UK, that's gone up 250%, and electric moped is up 200% in the same 5 year span. Now, it was the need for personal mobility during COVID lockdown that that first really shoved electric motorcycles into the perception of the average biker. And it was, I have to say, that when electric motorcycles sales fell last year, sort of post-COVID and after the subsidy was slashed, there was some distinct glee in certain elements of the motorcycle press, which really seemed to write off any future but an petrol engine one. But if the Google search analysis is to be believed, it suggests to me at least that far from turning our backs on electric motorcycles, there are plenty of people out there actually keeping an eye on what's happening in the development of these alternatively powered two-wheelers. Now, of course, it's not just the UK that counts. Between 2022 and 2030, the global electric motorcycle industry is projected to grow by an average of 10% each year. And certainly, as I've talked about in the past, there seem to be big rollouts going on in Africa and Indonesia. Now, the UK government has pledged some sums towards improving infrastructure, which I would describe as fairly paltry, with most of the promised cash still not actually having been delivered to people who want to put charging units in. But even so, it's estimated that up to 1 million UK households could own an electric motorcycle or a moped by 2034. Now, personally, I think that one's off the charts at the high end of a guesstimate. I'd expect the real figure to be a lot lower, because nobody's going to ditch their petrol engine bike and buy a very expensive electric motorcycle immediately. When their electric bike comes to its end of life and when it becomes more difficult to buy a new petrol engine machine, then maybe people will start swapping. But I certainly don't think that electric bikes are going away in the way that certain elements of the press seem to say. However, 2024 is the final year for the Yamaha YZF R1 as a street legal motorcycle, at least here in Europe. Now, Yamaha previously announced that the 2025 model year of the R1, just like the R6 before it, will only be available as a track machine. So I don't know if it is that they have a bunch of unsold R1 sitting around in a warehouse, but it seems that they have been moved through the distributor Crescent Yamaha to create a YZF R1 Jonathon Rea replica, and this is it. You get a choice of race or pre-season testing colour schemes. This is the race colour scheme. The bike's loaded with bolt-on go faster goodies already bolted on, all said to be the same as fitted to the race bike. That includes an Akrapovic exhaust system, forged aluminium wheels from Marchesini, Öhlins TTX rear shock and a Nix fork cartridge kit, and an adjustable steering damper. If that's not enough for you, you can go for upgraded Brembo brakes and T-drive racing rotors as an option. And there's also a garage pack that you can add to your purchase, which gives you front and rear stands, a bike mat, and clearly the star of the show, a custom Jonathon Rea bike cover. Now, Crescent say only 65 of these machines are going to be constructed, and of course it's limited edition bikes often end up in collections. I'm just wondering how many people will be interested in this bike, particularly since Jonathon Rea is currently languishing pretty much at the back of the World Superbike field this year. So how many people will be wanting to stump up the cash? Well, the base model with the added goodies before you start speccing the Brembos and everything else, it's £29,995, so quite a premium price to pay. Right, okay, so on to the final part of the show where I look in depth at a particular topic. And this time out, what I'm going to look at is vehicle detection systems and how they work with two-wheelers. Now, I've come across two recent studies from the USA which suggest that front crash prevention systems, that is the ones that basically stop the vehicle behind from running into the one ahead of it, still struggle to detect two-wheelers. Now, the first study was entitled "Are Front Crash Prevention Systems Less Effective at Preventing Rear-End Crashes Where Trucks and Motorcycles Are Struck?" They looked at no less than 160,000 two-vehicle rear-enders where the passenger vehicle hit a vehicle ahead, and where the vehicle ahead was either a passenger vehicle, a medium or heavy truck, or a motorcycle. Now, how they got this data was by using police crash stats from 18 US states. They then took the VIN number of the vehicle at the back that hit the one in front. They worked out from the vehicle data whether it actually had a front crash collision system or not. And what they found is that when compared with vehicles without the system, front crash prevention systems were associated with a 53% reduction in the risk of a rear end collision. So that's good news. But when you drill down a little bit deeper into the data, you find that when the vehicle being hit was a medium or heavy truck, only a 38% reduction was observed, which is very odd because you'd expect a whacking great truck in front of you, the system would actually detect it. And arguably for motorcyclists, the news was actually even worse, because whilst the analysis did find that it was a 41% reduction in rear end crush weights, when you think about a rear end collision, motorcyclists are extremely vulnerable to being hit from behind because they're often then promptly run over. In fact, the fatality rates from these collisions on freeways is behind the argument being made by American rider groups for the right to filter on freeways, because it allows the rider to get away from the back of the queue. Now, the researchers estimated that around 500 additional crashes involving motorcycles could be avoided each year were the front crash detection systems involved, so that they detect bikes with the same reliability as they detect passenger cars. But the researchers went further. They observed that nearly half of motorcycle crashes are two-vehicle crashes where the other vehicle was a passenger vehicle. They also pointed out that over a quarter of two-vehicle collisions involving motorcycles happen when the crash partner is a vehicle that turns left in front of the motorcycle. In other words, the classic Smidsy collision at a junction. And they said this could be addressed by a left turn assist system which detects motorcycles. So that's our right turn, of course. Now, the second study had an equally snappy title. This one was called "The Effectiveness of Forward Collision Warning Systems in Detecting Real-World Passenger and Non-Passenger Vehicles Relative to a Surrogate Target Vehicle." And this was a cooperative effort between the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety in the US and Transport Canada. Now, this time round, rather than analysing real-world crash data, it was a trial. And what they did was they used the kind of what's called surrogate vehicle targets that are used in the NCAP testing regime here in Europe. Now, surrogate vehicles are used as targets for testing for two reasons. Firstly, they're constructed to show up on radar, LiDAR camera, infrared systems that are typically used in these advanced driver systems to a standard, so you know exactly how the surrogate vehicle actually will work. Secondly, they're also soft, so they're less likely to damage test vehicles that don't stop in time. So they use two different systems here, both of which are currently used in real-world testing, and they replicate the shape and size of what's called a typical motorcycle. Incidentally, rather interestingly, they also used a real 2006 VFR 800 and also a Polaris Slingshot, one of the three-wheelers. Now, they tested them against 8 passenger vehicles. So with the test vehicle travelling at 45 miles per hour, 72 kph, 5 of the forward collision warning systems either did not consistently warn of the stationary VFR motorcycle, or they provided a warning of less than 2.1 seconds before collision. 2 vehicles failed to provide any collision warning at all. By contrast, the same systems in those vehicles that they tested, they detected a stationary mid-sized car at least 2.1 seconds prior to collision. So they also tested the performance in 4 of these 8 vehicles, but this time the motorcycle was moving slowly at 20 miles per hour, 32 kph, while the test vehicle was moving at 45 miles per hour. So basically this sort of replicates the sort of bottleneck where things all suddenly slow down in front of you. Now, this time the paper suggests or says that all 4 vehicles detected the slower moving motorcycle and did provide a 2.1 second warning as a minimum, but it's not clear whether the 4 vehicles that they selected included the 3 that previously detected the stop machine, or those that in fact didn't detect it. I don't know why they didn't actually simply repeat the test with the 8 cars that they previously used. It would make more sense. I don't know, maybe 4 of them were actually damaged if they did hit the Honda. They concluded that higher resolution cameras are important for reliably detecting smaller objects. Now, this second study apparently was carried out some years ago, 2016, and it's already been critiqued on the grounds that there have been 7 years of development. Thought tells us that the latest technology will only be fitted at some point in the future to brand new cars from the very latest model ranges. What we have available to test now isn't actually out there on the roads. So even a new car being sold today will probably use technology dating back from well before the model's first release, and then of course that vehicle will stay in service for many years to come. Even if software can be updated over the air, the hardware won't be. So with technology like this being passed down the model range too, it usually travels from the very top spec machine to the lower trim models, it's conceivable that even today a brand new vehicle being driven off the showroom floor could end up having 7 or 8 year old technology. So I don't think that's a valid criticism. They also critiqued, for some reason, the use of a motorcycle that was 10 years old at the time of the study. Now, I very much doubt that's an issue because motorcycles haven't changed significantly in 10 years. But it would, I would suggest, be useful to have a range of motorcycles for testing, because basically bikes aren't the same. They're not the same size. They don't have the same rear profile. If you think about a 2-up touring motorcycle with rear luggage, that's going to have a very much larger rear profile than a scooter with a solo rider on it. Now, if, as I suspect, rear cross-sectional area matters, then the systems that struggle to detect a motorcycle could really struggle with a small scooter. It would also be interesting to know if the motorcycles could easily be fitted with some kind of reflector to enhance detection. But okay, what about the systems themselves? Well, one thing I would suggest would be useful to know is where these 4 collision warning systems actually look. I seem to remember a report that suggested that the detectors are aimed at the centre of a driving lane, because that's where the back of a car will normally be found. And a suggestion in that report was that the sensors fail to detect motorcycles because motorcycles are often positioned offset in the lane. They're not in the middle of the lane. And that does tend to imply that the designers probably didn't have much awareness of how a motorcycle might be ridden differently from a car being driven. The other thing I tend to worry about is that people conflate forward collision warning systems with collision prevention systems, and so even if the idea that you get a warning if you're getting too close to something isn't bad enough, if people start believing it actually prevents a collision, then we could have a real problem. I still think we're going to keep eyes on mirrors for a while to go yet, and I really do suspect that this will only come to fruition in sort of useful way when there is actually a full system of talk between vehicles which uses the so-called Internet of all things, and so then the vehicle ahead can report its course, speed, direction, etc. To the vehicle behind it, and only then will I expect a really reliable reduction in rear end crashes. But we are years, probably decades away from anything like that. Right, okay, so if you've got anything that you would like to say about that particular story, I'd be more interesting to hear you. Nick's looked in. Good morning, Nick. Good to see you. That brings us pretty much to the end of today's show. So I just want to make quick reminder, check out the latest videos on YouTube in my 60-second safety and 60-second science series. There's a brand new 60-second science one went up on Thursday. And the idea is that because they're only 60 seconds long, they all offer you useful information in a quick and easy to digest format. Also, if you can take a moment, do the usual clicky stuff on those buttons to support the channel. Don't forget to tell people about Elevenses too. Share the link to your riding buddies. I'm sure they'll find something interesting to watch. And if you want to support me on Ko-fi, don't forget you can become a one-off supporter or a monthly subscriber. All you have to do there is follow the QR code. And for your support or your subscription, you get access to well over 1,000 better biking articles online. I doubt if you can read them in a month, which is why a subscription has to be the better option, doesn't it? It's probably the biggest resource of better riding information on the internet. And last but not least, don't forget the newsletter, which goes out on Sunday mornings, if I remember to do it in time. Here it is. That's the link to my Substack newsletter, and basically it gives you a heads up to all the previous week's articles, so you can get them delivered basically as a sort of an email newsletter simply by subscribing. So the QR code will take you straight there. That's it for today. Thank you once again for watching Elevenses. Elevenses will be back on Wednesday at the regular spot of 11 AM. It will be probably a relatively short show because I need to get off to Devon, unfortunately, to another funeral. But if you are out there on the bike today, do make sure you stay shiny side up and enjoy your ride. I'm Kevin Williams. This has been Elevenses, and once again, thank you for tuning in.